So I'm reading in the standard works again, and in this series I am reading through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order according to events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit. Right now I am still in Genesis. This will be chapter 47. Here we go. Israelites settle in Goshen. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Joseph sells grain to the Egyptians. Pharaoh receives their cattle and lands. Jacob desires to be buried with his fathers in Canaan. Okay. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, "My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan. And behold, they are in the land of Goshen." And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, "What is your occupation?" And they said unto Pharaoh, "Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers." They said moreover unto Pharaoh, "For to sojourn in the land are we come, for thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen." So here we are following Joseph's plan. He doesn't take all of his brothers, he takes 5 of them, doesn't say which 5. But he takes 5 of them, they follow Joseph's plan. They tell Pharaoh that they're shepherds and ask to dwell in Goshen. So, verse 5. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, "Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell, and if thou knowest any man of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle." And Joseph brought in Jacob his father, and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. So I like that. Pharaoh says, "Yeah, go ahead. They're your family. I trust you. We're good. Put them out there in Goshen. But if they know what they're doing, let them look after my cattle too." I like that. Apparently, as we talked about in the last video, the Egyptians said the shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians. It gives me the impression of something similar to the Hindu caste system, where you had the untouchables at the bottom. So the shepherds were just the lower class of society. So, but Jacob is now with Pharaoh, blesses Pharaoh, and now we have this conversation here. Verse 8. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, "How old art thou?" And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and went out from before Pharaoh. So this is where we get our timeline, how we know how old Jacob was. He's 130 when he comes to Pharaoh. This is the 2nd year of the famine. 2 years of famine, 7 years of plenty makes 9. Joseph was 30 years old when he became ruler of Egypt at the beginning of those 7 years. So 30 years, before that would be 9 plus 30, 39 years. Jacob was 81. Sorry, not 81, 91. Jacob was 91 when Joseph was born. Joseph was born approximately 6 years after Reuben, the eldest. So Reuben would have been born when Jacob was 85. He was born approximately 8 years after Jacob met Leah and Rachel, meaning I did have my numbers off. He was 77 when Jacob met Leah and Rachel. He was 77. He worked for 7 years. They got married. A year later, Reuben was born when he was 85. So that's where we can work out our timeline. Let's continue. Verse 11. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren, and all his father's household with bread according to their families. Apparently, either Goshen is part of the land of Ramesses, apparently, because it said they were going to be in Goshen. I don't know. Maybe it'll give more detail on that, but I mean, there's several other lands that have that have multiple names, so I'm not surprised that Goshen and Ramesses refer to the same place. Verse 13. And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, Give us bread. For why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. And Joseph said, Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle, if money fail. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for the flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. When that year was ended, they came unto him the second year, and said unto him, We will not hide it from my lord, how that our money is spent. My lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my lord, but our bodies and our lands. Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh. And give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof. Only the land of the priests bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Wherefore they sold not their lands. Then Joseph said unto the people, Behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the 5th part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your household, and for your food for your little ones. And they said, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. So, just quickly here, let us talk about this. This is, Joseph sold corn to the Egyptians and the Canaanites. Once they had no money left, he did a barter. Give me your cattle, and I'll give you the corn, the bread, which they agreed to. When their cattle was gone, they volunteered to give their land and their service to Pharaoh. Now, this indicates to me that before the time of Joseph, even though Pharaoh was king, he didn't own all the land. He wasn't a supreme ruler in that way. It seems to me that he was more of a judge before the time of Joseph. He ruled, he had his castle, he had his own lands, but he judged between the people. He didn't tax the people directly. They paid him for his service, in a sense. But after Joseph, now there is a standing tax of 20% on all increase, all the crops, all the increase each year. 20% belongs to Pharaoh because of Joseph. So it's a very interesting dynamic there. And why? I think Joseph was just serving Pharaoh. I don't think there's anything wrong with this arrangement. But this is how it happened, that before this, apparently, They weren't paying 20%. Maybe they had a 5% tax, but they weren't paying that much. And Pharaoh was not an overlord, a dictator over them. He was a king. He was a judge. And now they literally sold themselves to Pharaoh. And so as their contract, they have to give 20% of everything they make. I find that it's a fascinating dynamic of the ancient world that a lot of people don't think about when they're reading the Bible. But I don't know, maybe it's just me that finds this interesting. But verse 27, and Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph, and said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt, but I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, Swear unto me. And he sware unto him. And Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. Okay. So Jacob does not want to be buried in Egypt. This is a common thing. They want Abraham bought the field of Mamre, the cave of Mamre, and that's where Abraham was buried. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah. Leah is buried there as the first wife of Jacob, and Jacob wants to be buried there too. So he died when he was 147. Remember, Abraham was 175 and Isaac 180. So like he said, he did not live to the same age as his fathers. But he lived older. He lived longer than any of his descendants did. I think the oldest of his descendants after was 120, and that's Moses. So one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about Joseph getting all the land and everything is I find it also interesting that he didn't buy the land of the priests. And the reason he didn't buy the land of the priests is because Pharaoh, as kind of a tithing to the priests, was already giving them bread. He was giving them a monthly allotment. So they didn't need bread. They were not in the same position as the rest of Egypt. The king, or Pharaoh, was paying his tithing in his way, in his religion. And remember, from the book of Abraham, the first Pharaoh, the guy that actually named Pharaoh, he set up the kingdom of Egypt based on the patriarchal order. And therefore, tithing would have been part of that. And so we're seeing these kind of hints at the remnants of the true religion in the pagan religions of Egypt. And I just find it all very fascinating. But I'll see you in the next one.